Hi, I'm Femi OK, and you're in the stream. Can you imagine being unconscious for months while your family is told you may never wake up? Today we're going to talk to coma survivors. They'll tell us all about it and what their lives have been like since. So the stream team have been talking about comas and what we understand about comas and what it would be like to wake up from a coma. We had so many questions over the last couple of days as we were getting this show ready, but it seems that we're not the only ones. Malika Bilal, digital producer.
You're right, there's such a curiosity online from our communities with their own questions. In addition to that, there's some answers from actual survivors in the stream community. This is one of them on Twitter. This is Alexa Rose who writes in, as a coma survivor, I face everyday health challenges, but I also see the world through a new positive perspective. So we'll hear about some of those challenges in the show today. We want you to weigh in. You can tweet us with hashtag AJStream.
Now, one of our guests in the studio was already nodding at that comment. She's joining us here from Washington, D.C. Annalisa Meyer spent 3 months in a coma soon after experiencing seizures on her very first day of college. Annalisa, it is great to have you here. Just graduated this year. How do you feel?
I feel excellent. Thank you for having me.
All right, very good. All right, we're going to dig deeper into what happened to you in just a moment. We also have Avanika Khosla, and alongside her, her mother Shabani in New Delhi. Avanika spent 2 months in a coma last year after being hit by a car in Washington, D.C. Rafe Ahmed spent 5 weeks in a coma after a cycling accident. He joins us from Montreal. And also in Canada, we have Dr. Adrian Owen, a neuroscientist who will help us break down what's happening and what happens during a coma. So good to have you here, everybody. It's really good to have you here. Annalisa, I'm going to show everybody a picture of you when you were recovering in hospital. Well, we didn't even know that you were recovering, but this was you in hospital here. Can you take us back to when that was?
Oh, sure. So, yeah, that's me. Doesn't really look much like me anymore.
Yeah.
That was... So, as we were saying, on my very first day of class, I had a seizure.
Yeah.
And I'd never had one before. And so, because of all of the seizures, and I had a lot of problem breathing, they had to induce me into a coma to prevent more complications from happening. And of course, that left my family very, very sad and distraught and wondering what would happen.
Yeah. So this happened. I mean, it literally just crept up on you. Did they even say, look, Annalisa, this is what we're going to do to you. This is what your experience. Any warning whatsoever?
To be perfectly honest, I do not remember a single thing between mid-2008 until towards the end of 2009, maybe even early 2010.
Wow.
I don't remember. And what I think I may remember from early or mid-2010 or late 2009, I don't really know if they're my actual memories or if it's more like, because people have told me it so many times, that I have a sense of understanding.
Avanika, you had a horrible car accident and you were walking with your friend, and fill in the rest of the story. What happened?
So my friend came to visit me, my very close friend from India. She was living in New York and I was working in DC, and she came for the weekend and we went out for drinks, and we were walking home and we were crossing the street and a car hit us. Wow. So her body was completely screwed and I got hit on the brain.
I'm going to show you a bit of Rafe's brain. Rafe, as I show a bit of your brain, talk us through what happened to you. Have a look at this. All right. Major stitches going on there. What happened? This is terrifying, just even looking.
I was hit by a car. I mean, I can just tell you what people have told me. I was hit by a car while cycling home. Yeah. And my brain kept swelling. And if the pressure doesn't recede, and the doctor can confirm this, if it presses down on your spine, it can kill you instantly. Oh. So what they did when they tried medication, it didn't work. They went in and they removed half my skull, put it in a freezer for about 6 weeks or so. Yeah. And then when the swelling had receded, and they thought it was safe to put it back in, they went back and put it in. So that, in fact, is after I had my skull back in. There was a period for about close to 6 weeks when I had half my skull was missing. So it just skin flap.
Wow, oh my gosh, that's intense.
But one of the things that I want to pivot to, just based on community, is what happens when you wake up and that recovery period and reliving your life. So this is Rahim, and this person's writing in on what he thinks the challenges might be. So he says one of those might be how to bridge that missing part, that gap in between. And another person picks up on that. This is Joanna, and she says, how do you cope with knowing that time only stopped for you, and then how do you catch up with that life? Abanika, do you want to tackle that one?
Yeah, it's funny. After the accident, it was just 2 months, so not that much happened, but everything happened for my benefit. I've known so many people in my life, and all of whom did something to make sure I knew that they were still in my life and they cared dearly for me.
And you hear these tragic stories, Dr. Adrian, and then you get questions like this from community, just trying to pick apart this a little bit. This is Ahmed, and he says, what is the difference between brain injury and coma? So what is that medical definition for us lay people, doctor?
Well, a coma is something that can occur as a result of a brain injury. And a brain injury really can be one of any number of things. Some of the stories you've just heard have been about brain injuries that have occurred as a result of a trauma, being hit by a car, where your head literally takes a hard blow, your brain takes a hard blow, and that traumatic brain injury is what leads to coma. We also heard an example where the coma had been induced, medically induced, and that's a different type of coma. The end result is the same. You end up going into a sort of a sleep state. And that coma wasn't the result of a brain injury. It was actually induced in order to reduce the amount of brain injury that was occurring. The theory there would have been that by putting the patient into a coma, the brain is more likely to be able to, it's less likely to cause damage to itself, further damage to itself. So,
Shabani, what do you remember from when Avanika was, she was in her coma, family was around her? What did the doctors tell you?
It was a really hard situation. It's hard to express this because we were in India and we got a phone call saying that Avanika's had an accident. So we left right away, and they told us that on the coma recovery scale, I think, or was it the glaucoma scale, which is from 3 to 15, or she was 3, which is the Glasgow scale. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
That's the
I was also 3.
So.
All right, so you can't just drop in that, Rafe and Shabani, and then say, I was a 3. It was like, what are you talking about? What is that?
Well, I'm delighted if Rafe was a 3 because he looks absolutely fine.
Exactly.
And well, Avanika's doing very well, but we still have a little bit of a journey ahead.
All right.
So I'd really like to hear more about Rafe. But yeah, anyway, so we reached the US, and the doctors, I don't know, but I think it's just a different approach. I sort of got the feeling that they said that it was pretty hopeless. So we didn't really know how we were going to go forward, or I don't think I even remember the first few weeks. Yeah. I prefer not to, maybe.
Goodness me.
And and then, from ICU to a room to a rehab place, and then
So doctor, just very quickly, this being a 3 on the scale, tell us about the scale just very quickly so we know what
So the Glasgow Coma Scale, this is the way that we assess how bad a patient is when they come in, typically when they come into the ICU. The lower you are, the worse you are, basically, and possibly the less the chances of you recovering. So a 3 is actually is pretty poor.
Are you amazed that we've got Annalisa and Rafe and Avanika all here talking on the stream? Is it extraordinary?
I'm impressed. Well, it's I've seen a lot of patients during my career, so I'm very happy that you've got them all there. That's probably the best way to put it.
We are too.
Not everybody comes through it the way they have, and I congratulate all of them.
And that's actually a point that not everyone comes through it is something that people online realize and recognize. So this is Ahmed, and he says, Some are never able to recover completely, but for those who do, he says they may need to relearn how to speak, walk, and even eat. So Shubhani, I'm actually going to give this one to you. And Avanika, of course, you can jump in, but I'm wondering, Shubhani, as a mother who went through this with your child the first time when she was a child, what was that process like for you in reteaching her how to do some of those things?
It was probably the hardest thing that I ever had to do in my life. Yeah, I didn't know, she couldn't swallow, so she had to be taught to swallow, and then walking, of course, came much later, and eating was a really slow process. I think maybe 3 months after being in hospital that they started even giving her thick liquids just to see that she could swallow them, and then walking and talking, and very little. You know, it was a very, very slow process, and I mean, we still have a long journey ahead, so that's why I was very keen to talk to Rafi and find out how he's doing. And
you know,
it's a pleasure.
Yeah, what do you want to ask
unique.
him?
Your experience is unique, and that's because you have never spoken to other people who've been through this. Yeah. And then you realize that everything that they're saying happened to me. That entire thickened liquids, like, you never know that swallowing is a very difficult neurological function until they tell you, and then they give you thickened liquids, and then learning how to walk again, talking. Oh, it's everything everyone else is saying reverberates.
Yes.
And it's kind of crazy. I mean, you don't meet other coma patients in your daily life. You really don't.
Annalisa, go ahead.
Okay,
go
yeah. No, I agree completely. No, I had the same thing. I had to really learn how to walk, talk, eat, chew, everything and anything. And it's funny.
Exactly, I did too.
And so I
had to learn the whole 9 yards.
Exactly.
Just reading, I couldn't even do ABC. I couldn't read ABC. I couldn't read anything. And they taught me from scratch.
See, one thing that my physical therapist used for me is, like, I really like dancing and I really like sports. So they'd be like, to get me to lift my arms, they'd be like, pretend you're shooting a basketball, pretend you're doing this, pretend you're kicking a soccer ball. And so all of that helped me to get, one, more excited about the physical therapy, and two, and there's one funny family story where at one point I was sleeping or whatever, and my legs were moving, and like the doctors were really worried. They're like, oh no, what's happening to her? And then my mom turned salsa music. She's like, she's dancing. She's actually dancing in her sleep.
It's all right, it's not a seizure.
Like, it's okay.
So Annalisa dancing.
So technically I danced before I relearned how to do everything else.
Yeah.
But
what is that like, though, when you're having to relearn things that you know that you used to be able to do?
It can be really frustrating.
Yeah.
It can be very, very, very frustrating.
Yeah.
For example, I mean, anything from walking, you know, I used to be a runner and I'd be like, why isn't this coming easily? Or I used to be good at this academic subject. Why is it taking me so hard to get it right? And that took a lot of time for me to get over. Yeah. And so it wasn't until I had to come to the realization, like, I had to stop comparing myself to my prior self.
Sure.
Because you can do that to a certain degree. Yeah. But at the same time, it's unfair.
That's a lesson I should learn too. I need to stop comparing myself to the old Avanika, because so much has changed, and I hate believing it. I want to be Avanika, but I have to take the hard way.
If this can comfort you.
I've never met the old Avanika, but I'm telling you, this Avanika seems perfectly normal.
Yeah, exactly. You do seem perfectly fine.
Thank you.
And also, like, it took me a long time to come to this realization. It took me a long time. So, I mean, it's part of the healing process is accepting truly what happened to you. For the longest time, in part due to my memory, in part due to just, I guess, shame, which doesn't make sense in the context, but trust me, like, I felt really bad. You know, my family had to go through so much to help me. And again, with my memory.
Exactly, I feel exactly the same way. I feel like because of me, my parents had to give up so much, and my boyfriend to be with me every step of the way.
So the way I would spin it is, how about, because they put all that work into it for you, you might as well be the best you can be to make them feel like it was all super worth it. To make them feel like
if you guys feel the same way.
Yeah.
We just got into the coma, we came out, we're fine now, thankfully, but it's our parents and family friends that really went through the ordeal. You know, we just, I don't know, I think it was a lot easier on us. I know that's not fair to say, but in a way I think it was more difficult for our families.
Avanika and Annalisa, don't make me cry on TV. That would be a first, all right? Stop it already.
So there's a question here, Ivanika, that I'm going to give to you because you were talking about your life before and after. So this person writes in, do survivors wake up and come back with different personalities? Are they a new person? Do you consider yourself a new person? And were there any tweaks in your personality that you can see or that your family tells you are a little different?
That's so funny that you asked that, because I have a whole new personality. Before the accident, I was such a snob to Hindi music. Now I'm obsessed with it. So much of my life has changed. It's funny, when I was in a coma, my parents and my boyfriend would play music for me. And I've become a music addict now. I'm obsessed with music. So much of me has changed.
And also Vanika's personality has changed. She used to be a very, she was a quiet, shy, introverted, I wouldn't say introverted, but just sort of shy, thought things through, not gregarious at all.
I love the way that Ivanika is now shouting out, shy! I used to be shy, everybody! I used to be shy! Okay, no longer. Annalisa, do you feel that your personality changed?
I feel like my core values are still the same. So like in terms of family, political beliefs, whatever, all of that, social beliefs, all that's still the same.
Yeah.
But my personality has changed a bit. Yeah. I mean, immediately afterwards, I was very sensitive to anything anybody would mention, right? Yeah. And so that's obviously a big change. People had to be careful with the words. Yeah. Now I feel like, kind of what she was saying, I'm a lot more in tune to how other people suffer. Or, I mean, I study human rights now, right? Yeah. That was a big shift for me. Originally, I was going through a different path, and now I'm like, boom.
Rafe, did you wake up smarter?
I woke up the same idiot that went into that coma.
I'm so sorry.
The very first question I asked was, can I have a drink to celebrate? And they're like, do you not understand where you've been? And so, no, the same idiot. And it's, you learn more with every passing day. I think you get smarter. I didn't change at all. It's just how life has evolved since. But that's, I wouldn't even say that's the coma, it's just life.
Well, it's interesting, Rafe, because it's your story that connected with one person in particular on Twitter. This is Ashafa, who writes in, having half of your skull in a freezer for 6 weeks is the height of development. I wish we could go to that extent to save lives in Nigeria. So, Dr. Adrian, I want to internationalize this a little bit, because you see that tweet, and then there's this one from Nafizi, and he says, lack of advanced physiotherapy facilities is decreasing the chances of survival of coma patients in poor countries. So I know the work that you do is very advanced, but I'm wondering if you can speak to what it's like in places where they don't have that kind of technology. What are those odds for coma patients?
Well, I think things are very different, and the example you've used is an excellent one of the having the skull removed. I mean, this is a procedure that is done to prevent the damage that the brain causes to itself and to the spinal cord when it swells. I mean, the brain is like everything else. If it goes through a very severe impact, it starts to swell. And you imagine swelling inside the skull leads to what we call compression. The brain literally compresses itself, it squeezes itself, causing even more damage than the original injury did. And the procedure that was developed some years ago to just basically take the top of the skull off and let the brain swell outside of the skull and then gradually go back in. It sounds barbaric, but it works, and it's saved thousands of lives. And of course, you know, it's complicated, and it requires neurosurgery, and it requires people who know what they're doing. And I think it's just one example of really, in these sort of situations, being in the right place, is so critically important to whether you're going to survive or not.
All right, so guests here, we've got a neuroscientist here, and we've got different guests who've all come out of a coma. So Annalisa, Ivanika, Shibani, Rafe, or Doctor, do you have any questions for each other while I've got you all here connected? You don't have to.
I want to know. Yes,
Shibani,
I want to know when Rafe, when did you have your accident? How long ago?
2012, October 8th. In fact, it was the 3rd year anniversary just about, 5-6 days ago?
Yeah, wow.
And how much later did you get back to whatever it is that you were doing?
So much like you were told, my parents too were told he may or may not wake up. If he does wake up, it may take him several years to regain any sense of normalcy. He'll have to learn how to walk, talk again. And I woke up with my memory intact, I had suffered extreme muscle atrophy, so I had to like learn how to sit up and walk, and like just go through the regular physiotherapy. But
as did I.
I am the luckiest person alive because of a severe accident.
As am I. Just to that.
People fall off a chair and their lives are changed forever. I was hit by a car, and 7-8 weeks later, I went home. I was extremely thin. I lost a lot of weight, and besides that, I mean, I'm the luckiest person alive. I really am. And like, as are we all.
Is this your great stories? People say, "Oh, this amazing thing happened to me." Like, do you know, I was in a coma once. And it's like, is this like your fantastic story to tell for the rest of your life?
Oh, see, that's what I will ask. That's what I will ask these guys.
Yeah.
Should there be a moratorium? I mean, at one point you say, you know, like,
stop talking about the coma, Rafe.
History. No, I mean, not other people, but is there a point that doesn't define me anymore? Therefore, like, that should not be a story I even bring up because it's history. It's done.
Interesting.
No, I don't think I've reached that point yet.
I don't think you have either. Thank goodness for that, for us.
I'm on this show.
Well said, Rafa. I'm really frustrated because my reading is like I'm a 5-year-old. And it really frustrates me and it drives me crazy.
Right.
So maybe in a year later, I'll be on the same page as you.
So if I may chime in, so I'm 7 years after what happened to me. And that defining point you're talking about, it doesn't like, well, for me, it doesn't like officially come, but it kind of like hides itself. So for example, when I first started at the university again, my memory was so bad, everything was so bad. I mean, I had to really be vocal about it. I had to talk to all my friends, say, look, I'm really gonna have to help, you have to help me like figure out where I'm going. I had a campus map for me for the university for the first 3 years that I was at the university. Because even though my classroom was in the building right next to me, I was worried I'd get lost. But that being said, with each coming year, with each passing year, I mean, I've had less and less people to have to bring it up to. I no longer introduce myself as like, hi, I'm Elisa. I'm the girl, you know, who had an autoimmune disease and was in a coma for 3 months. No. Now I can just be like, I'm Elisa. And so with each group of friends, I select one person and I let that one person know, like, by the way, this is my story. If you see me acting funny, come help me. Yeah. And then that's how I've been able to survive. So it no longer defines me. Now I see myself instead as, you know, the person who's currently looking for a job. Right? so things, as more things go by, so that should bring courage and hope.
Yeah, I have to say, like, the first 2-year anniversaries meant quite a bit, but this 3rd year one rolled around, it went by, and I didn't even really pause to reflect. So maybe, except for this program, obviously, that time has started to come for me as well. Like, it's become more of a memory, and it'll hopefully fade.
It will.
I mean, it's a cool story. It'll always be a cool story.
I'm looking forward for that happening to me as well.
It will.
It will.
For it to be a happy memory.
I hope it happens soon. I hope it happens very soon.
The sooner the better, right?
Yeah. Doctor, one of the things we were curious about was the kind of research that's going on right now to try and help coma patients get out of their coma. How do we know what state they're in? Will they recover? Because these are hard decisions for the families to actually make. All of our guests today were told, well, we don't know if they're actually going to wake up. And here they are on the show. So that research is so critical. Just give us a little hint about what's happening out there.
Yeah, well, you know, in the last few years, brain imaging, brain scanning has come on a long way, and we have extremely sophisticated tools right now. One called functional magnetic resonance imaging, or fMRI, is proving to be absolutely an essential tool in understanding which patients might recover, which patients are less likely to recover. And we have a huge program of research here in Canada where we scan patients, like the people in your studio today and online, whilst they're in a coma. We also follow them through. If they move into a vegetative state, we scan them in a vegetative state. And what we're looking for are two things: signs that they aren't what they appear to be, signs that there's something going on in there, and second, critically, signs that they might recover, some indication that these are the subset of people who are likely to go on and recover. Because if we can identify those people, we can obviously push the limited resources that we all know about, you know, in that direction. And I think we're making good progress. The last few years have seen enormous changes in our understanding of conditions like coma and vegetative state, and how new technologies like brain imaging can assist in that way.
Very good. All right. we're going to be watching that very carefully. It's hard not to have spent time with coma survivors and then not be absolutely fascinated by what's going on with the medical profession. Rafe, Avanika, Shibani, Annalisa, Dr. Adrian Owen, it has been fascinating spending time with you. Malika, where do you want to leave us?
Definitely has, and I'll leave us with this tweet from someone that really speaks to how difficult a decision this is to make, that you mentioned earlier, Femi. Skepe says, my niece is in a coma, and today's episode has given me hope. Now I know I have to be patient instead of rushing. Thank you, and we wish the best for her niece and all of our guests who might be watching and in the same position.
Absolutely. All right, take care, everybody. Thanks for your time. Hello again, this is the Stream's online post show. Thank goodness we have a post show, so much more to talk about. We're talking to coma survivors and also Dr. Adrian Owen, who's a neuroscientist, and our online community as well. Malika.
Rafi, there's a question here that I'm going to pose to you. It's actually a question that was posed in our community. This is Deanna on Twitter, who says, did coma survivors, hear the people around them? Now, this person got an answer online, but I also want to hear your answer. So this is Stephanie, and she says her father, who entered into a coma, heard people around him, and the things they said weaved into his coma dreams. She goes on to say medical staff didn't think that he could hear, and they spoke about him over him, and later, when he woke up, he could recite their conversation. So do you have memories of that time and what you could hear once you came out, and were you able to separate fact from fiction?
For one, even when you do come out of it, there's a period when it's hard to discern reality from that coma state. And I honestly lived entire lives. Like, I lived in different places at different times. But I will say this, I did have a lot of dreams with friends and people that I hear later came and visited me and sang to me or something along those lines. And they did, as the tweet said, found a way to weave themselves into my dreams. So I had a lot of different dreams as well, but a lot of them also involved people that had come to visit.
Annalisa.
Yeah,
it's funny that you remember that, because I don't remember anything of what happened. It was just 2 months and I was in a coma, and I don't remember anything of what happened.
So Avanika, the last memory you had before you went into the coma was what?
Say that again?
The last memory you had before you went into a coma, the last memory.
So I don't remember very much. I remember moving to the States after I got my dream job. And I went to the US and I was there for about a week, which I remember. And I stayed with my 2 new roommates, and
then the next thing you remember after that is, so you moved to the States, you had your roommates, and then the next memory was what?
My next memory was when I was in mass rehab, and my boyfriend Mark came all the way. So my parents would come in the morning. They would come, and I would wake up early, and I would feel like my parents left me and went. So that's why my parents would come meet me at 6:30 in the morning.
Right.
And they would stay till about 3 in the afternoon. And my boyfriend Mark would come at about 1. Have lunch with us and stay till I fell asleep.
So that's really bizarre. So Avanika remembers a chunk of her life, and then the next thing she's in rehab. Annalisa, for you, what do you remember?
I'm going to answer both your question and the question before about what the Twitter person asked.
Yeah, go ahead.
So about whether or not you hear the people. So what I remember before getting sick is I had been getting into a lot of fights with one of my cousins in particular, which is weird because normally we got along pretty well. But she and I just kept getting into fight after argument after argument after argument. And then next thing you know, I'm in the coma. So I don't remember anything in particular that was said to me, but I feel like somehow like my body did get it, because when I woke up, I suddenly felt the need to like, hey, like we should talk. And apparently while I was in the coma, she would say to me things like, let's forget all of our fights. Let's forget everything we ever argued about. I want you to survive.
Okay.
And I'm sure other family members said the same thing. So I feel like somewhere deep down in my brain, something understood it, something clicked or whatever.
Yeah.
Another thing that makes me realize that I must have been listening, so I'm bilingual, right? I'm Guatemalan, US. I speak both English and Spanish. Right before getting sick, I made a playlist of music to help me calm down, with music primarily in Spanish, but some in English. And they play that list to help me calm down through the time that I was in the coma. And when I woke up, my Spanish was much better. when I fell asleep. So I must have been listening.
Yeah, go ahead, doctor.
A brilliant illustration of why it is that every patient who experiences coma is completely different. I mean, we hear completely different stories here. People who were slightly aware, perhaps aware of some of the things that were going around them. Another patient who had no awareness whatsoever, and then a patient who was able to incorporate aspects of the environment into her sort of mental states while she was in a coma. And this is really the problem with this condition, with coma, is that you never know in any one condition when the patient is in that situation. How can you know? In some cases they could be aware.
Doctor, should you just assume that they are aware? Because we hear lots of stories about families discussing, should we turn our relative off? Is there, I don't think I can manage this any longer. It's been going on for months or years. Should you just assume that the person who's in a coma can hear you?
I mean, I think for the sake of peace of mind and the peace of mind of the patient concerned, I think it makes good sense to assume that the person is aware. I don't think that means that we should all believe they are all aware, because I think in many, perhaps most cases, they aren't. But there's no point in causing unnecessary distress, is there? So I think good medical practice would suggest that you assume that they are aware and that they can hear you.
Let me play you a little clip. This is Claire Wineland, and Claire went into a medically induced coma, and not all of you can remember what happened during your coma, but Claire had some really interesting memories. Have a look at this.
Another thing that would happen was uncomfortable positions that they would put me in. My brain would make up a story for why I was in those positions. At one point, they had to actually tilt the bed in something called Trendelenburg, which is literally tipping you upside down. So there I was, upside down and swollen like a balloon at that point. And in my head, I was going in this weird hammock thing. And then I remember I got my foot caught in the hammock, and so I was hanging upside down. And I was like, this is so weird, why can't I move? I should just be able to pull myself up. But then logic doesn't really work very well.
Absolutely. All right, take care everybody. Thanks for your time.